Hello and welcome to episode 777 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. I am one of the co-founders here at ETR, and we are coming off of a what am I doing in my life kind of week. Yes, that's right. As I forewent any semblance, any chance of getting on the team Saturday night by setting my alarm for 4:30 a.m. Sunday morning, a great smile emerged deep inside me. Because yes, where would I rather be at 5 a.m. on a Sunday morning than reading old articles about Eric Saubert? Where else would I rather be than go back and forth for hours, agonizing over things like Saubert versus Foster Moreau, hammering my emotionless soul over 2v2s involving Cam Akers and Zach Charbonnet and Jake Ferguson? And honestly, I do love it. But the truth is that a lot of these decisions are so incredibly close. Of course, each week, once it's over, once we know the results, one side or one structure or one take is going to look like the quote unquote right one. But if we played the slate 10,000 times, well, in a lot of cases, not all, but in a lot of cases, it might be 6,000 one side versus 4,000 the other, or 5,500 versus 4,500, or 5,200 versus 4,800. And that is not to say that every take, every projection input, every sim result, it's not to say that those are all theoretically right, regardless of result, because they're not. I had the stone wrong take on Saquon Barkley this season. We could run the season 10,000 times and it would be wrong 10,000 times. In week 2 DFS, I paid up for Patrick Mahomes over Jaden Daniels. That was dead wrong, you know? Mahomes is a game manager, especially against Lou Anarumo defense. I just didn't know ball. But on things like week 2, Allen Lazard versus Tyler Johnson versus Andre Yoshivas. Oh, Adam, you played Lazard. You're a fish. Yeah, he sucked week 2, but role was good. Same role he had in week 3. Share a narrative in week 3 gets cooking with Aaron Rodgers. Lazard goes 348-1 against the Patriots. Regardless, and so because of results, one game sample results, people say, oh, yeah, Lazard was a great play in week 3, horrible play in week 2. Anyway, my point on all this is that I do think debating players versus players, spots, ranges of outcomes, I do think all that's really fun and I love it and I'm addicted to it and I can't stop. But if I was purely optimizing for my time, I need to stop agonizing over those very close decisions. And yeah, now that I'm staring down the barrel of the back nine of my life, I'm 42 now. It's just a never ending struggle in my head of I have X amount of healthy years and healthy hours left. How do I want to spend them? And to be clear, I very much understand this is a first world problem. I'm incredibly fortunate that the thoughts in my head are about optimizing my time for happiness. I know there are tons of people out there who simply aren't able to have those thoughts at all. I get it. Regardless, all of that brings me to my actual point of bringing any of this up, because I know no one cares. The reason I brought it up is because you may have noticed that I included my FanDuel cash team in the DFS cash lineup review article Sunday night. This season, I've been playing a little bit bigger on FanDuel versus DraftKings in terms of buy-in level for two simple reasons. I think it's easier for me personally to make the team I think is quote unquote right. The cash team I think is quote unquote right on FanDuel. And I think the action has been softer on FanDuel. And I want to be clear that I have a sickness and I'm only thinking about EV. My goal isn't to be the best DFS player in the world, to battle at the highest levels. My goal is to get in games where I have an edge and do my best to realize that edge. And so if that means dealing with FanDuel's horrific UX, the lack of attention to their DFS product, customer service issues, whatever, so be it. So my plan right now is to keep playing cash on DK. Nowhere else can you get the amount of volume in head-to-head or really anything else as you can get on DraftKings. But try to settle on a DraftKings cash team pretty quickly, settle on a cash team for FanDuel pretty easily, and then just move on to concentrating on tournaments. And it's not due to results. So far through 3 weeks in head-to-heads, I'm at 13.4% ROI on DraftKings head-to-heads and 12.8% ROI on FanDuel head-to-heads. And lifetime, it's pretty close. 9.7% ROI lifetime head-to-head on DK, 9.1% ROI head-to-head lifetime on FanDuel. In the lineup review article each Sunday, I'm going to keep talking through DraftKings and the analysis because I know that's what people want. I did a couple lineup reviews last year when I only played FanDuel about FanDuel stuff, and people just hated that for whatever reason. Um, you know, what I do is not going to be set in stone. Some weeks I may play DraftKings only. Some weeks I may play FanDuel only. We'll see. But when I play both, like I said, I'll keep the analysis, the blurbs about DraftKings. But in that article, I'll include a screenshot of the FanDuel team that I played. And regardless, I'll track results at the bottom alongside DraftKings. Anyways, I'm not saying that all this stuff is the right move for everyone. I just always try to be transparent with what's going on and what I'm thinking. And I know I've said this a ton of times on the solo pods before, but the best action is rarely on the most mainstream best UX sites. That goes for anything, poker, DFS, whatever. If you're not, especially if you're not trying to play big stakes or high volume. If you're trying to play big, then yeah, you need to be on the most mainstream sites. Last thing I'd say on this is playing multiple sites does allow for natural hedging. I don't like to hedge, aka play two cash lineups on DraftKings. It's just so unlikely both win. But due to pricing and structure difference, you can hedge across sites. So, for example, in week 3, I thought Chris Godwin versus Chris Olave was really, really close. Godwin was cheaper on FanDuel. I had him there. Olave was a little bit cheaper on DraftKings. I had him there. On DraftKings, I ended up playing Titans defense. On FanDuel, I could have played Titans, but we had Colts defense with a better projection. Played them on FanDuel. Cam Akers was absurdly cheap on FanDuel, still minimum 4K. I had him there. But on DraftKings, I went Zach Charbonnet over Cam Akers. And yeah, speaking of that, by the way, that was one spot from Sunday. I'm really glad I got right. In hindsight, only a $1,300 gap between Akers and Sharbs on DraftKings, but Charbonnet ticketed for roughly 100% of the running back touches. Charbonnet plays well in the pass game. He's a really solid home favorite against Skylar Thompson. Akers, meanwhile, free agent off the street, surprisingly makes the team. Dario Gunawable is there. They're on the road against the Brian Flores defense. So yeah, relieved I got that one right. As for tournaments in week 3, similar story to week 2 for me. Had some really good stuff. Played a lot of Saquon Barkley as leverage off of Devonta Smith. Jalen Hurts, who I thought would be over-owned in tournaments. Faded Alvin Kamara in tournaments, even though I had him on both sites in cash. But I had no Juwan Jennings. And so just like in week 2, when I had no Kamara in tournaments, you just can't win if you don't have the guy who goes for a 50 ball. So I cashed 3 of 6 GPP teams. Best one was a Lamar Andrews stack. Hit hard at running back there with Saquon and Jonathan Taylor. Had Rashee Rice there. Yes, FanDuel does include the Sunday Night Football game on their main slate. Had Colts D. Wanted to talk about that Colts D play for a second. My intention, especially for tournaments, when picking a defense is simply how many chances can I get at a pick six or a strip sack for a score? That's it. Not points allowed, not anything else. That's it. So how can we project these really big splash outcomes for defense? Well, first, we need a team that's leading, or ideally we want a team that's leading. Obviously, trailing teams are going to drop back way more. We can't get pick sixes and strip sacks for a score unless quarterbacks are dropping back. Also, we need a defensive front that can generate pressure or a brutal offensive line. In Thorne's ranks this week, which are in his offensive line, defensive line mismatch article each week, he had Bears number 30 offensive line in the NFL for week 3. And then we also need a quarterback who will make mistakes. Obviously, Caleb Williams, a rookie, is making plenty of them. And so is Shane Fraudrin. So clearly there's some hindsight analysis there, but I do think people just gloss over defense too quickly, too often. Yeah, on average scoring, they all bunch together a lot. But on ceiling outcomes, think we can try to at least predict the spots where we can find big hits. Like Will Levis, guy is a walking mistake, and they will turn very pass heavy when trailing. Clearly a good one to attack. Packers defense went off in week 3. Oh, one more thing on the Barkley versus Kamara stuff. So on FanDuel, Barkley was 6.3% owned in the $222 buy-in at $8,700. Alvin Kamara was 34.7% owned at $8,400. And that wasn't a surprise. That's roughly how we had it projected in our P-owns. We had projected 30% ownership on Kamara, 6.9% on Barkley. So I know that DFS tournament theory has gotten really complex and sophisticated with all the sim stuff, but there are still really basic things that have big edges. Is Alvin Kamara 5x more likely to outperform Barkley? It's not that simple, I get it, but of course he's not 5x more likely to outperform Barkley. And part of this is understanding projection inputs. The Eagles rushing touchdown stuff is really, really hard to project. If they get tackled at the 1 a bunch of times, Jalen Hurts is going to go off. If they get tackled at the 3, Barkley's going to get his. And it doesn't even have to be a bunch of times getting tackled at the 1. Just one tush push for a touchdown versus one Barkley goal line touchdown is truly a massive difference. So understanding that, there's going to be some projection fragility along with that ridiculous projected own gap. I don't need a sim to wake up Sunday and see that Barkley's a good GPP play, If only I could come up with 9 of those a week and then all have them hit their top 1% outcomes at the exact same time, I could finally be at peace. But alas. All right, need to get to listener questions, but before I do, few things. Wanted to give a shout out to our NFL props team. It is an absolute war out there in the NFL prop streets these days. Just an incredible grind to originate all of our own numbers from the bottom up and battle the books on lines that are widely available. Not openers, not only on one soft book, not weird promo nonsense. This year, we also added alts to the prop sub, things like Quentin Johnston to lead the game in receiving yards 8-1, or Dak Prescott 300 plus passing yards, plus 295, etc. So far this season, we're 29-23 for plus 5.98% ROI on straights, 11-30 for plus 67% ROI on those alt long shots. For more details, if you're a props bro, you must read the FAQ on props on the site. Just go to the props set tab. You'll find the FAQ there. Second, if you are a best ball bro, NBA drafting season is upon us. We are covering NBA best ball in a new sub, have ranks up for Underdog, DraftKings, and Drafters. Check it out in the NBA tab. And lastly, this program is indeed brought to you by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. I mentioned the NBA best ball. They also have this $5 buy-in NFL snake draft tournament every week that's just getting huge. It's called the Battle Royale. We have ranks and sim analysis for that as well. If you've never tried Underdog, promo code ETR for a deposit bonus. That's promo code ETR at underdogfantasy.com. All right. Enough is enough. It is time for everyone's favorite portion of the program, the listener question. All right. Appreciate the questions from everyone. Going to do 4 today. Question 1 comes from Jacob. He says, what are your general thoughts on the EV expected value of dating? If your goal is to get married and that provides you with some arbitrarily high utility, I'd argue that any given date is very plus EV. However, since most dates don't lead anywhere, the likelihood of any given date being negative EV is very high, right? Oh man, Jacob, so this is one spot, dating, where I'd really, really try not to think about EV. I know that I'm not one to talk, right? I'm probably the worst person to ask about this. I have not been on a date since literally 2005, almost 20 years. I mean, my God, that's depressing. But my very, very uninformed take, if I listen to what everyone tells me that's out there in the dating streets, is that all these people are getting on the hashtag team a ton when they're grinding the apps, like Tinder or Hinge or Bumble or whatever app. Oh, Adam, look at all these matches. Oh, look at this. Oh, this girl loves me. That girl loves me. I'm juggling 10 dates at a time. We go get drinks and then it's on. And of course, me being the deranged, cynical, depraved, depressed human that I am, I believe nothing. Like, it's so unfathomable to me that a woman is willing to engage in intercourse with these slobs. I would never believe it unless I actually saw dick into vagina. Like him telling me, like some dude telling me about his stories from the dating apps, not enough. Me seeing him go into a room with her, not enough. Not enough. I would need to see it with my own 2 eyes. But anyway, Jacob, back to the question. My very uninformed take is that there's some fun EV, right? There's some expected value in just straight fun, some life EV experience in just going out on dates, even if it leads to nothing. So many of these animals, and by animals, I mean dudes who actually speak to women in the wild, they tell me that the fun, the thrill, the dopamine hit is in the chase, which I could see that. And then, of course, you have a chance that you bink someone you really like. And that, of course, is the stone cold nuts. I heard our king, Sam Hinkie, say this once before. The biggest decision you will ever make in your entire life is who you marry, period. Not even close. And I agree with him. You just have to be 1,000% certain that you get it right. So, anyways, Jacob, I say, get out there, man. Live, damn it. Live. Question 2 from Crypto Degen. He says, are you getting the same vibes I am that best ball is similar to poker? During the poker boom, if you just played ABC poker, you had an edge because so many people didn't understand the fundamentals. Pretty quickly, though, most people learned those fundamentals or ran out of money. Playing by the book wasn't enough anymore. Do you feel best ball is on the same path? And if so, how much longer will it take for stacking, roster construction, ADP value alone to not be enough? Once this happens, what strategies will profit? Aggressive player takes? Really good question, Crypto Degen. This is always how it goes in any peer-to-peer game, right? At the beginning, the player pool is massive and growing. People are terrible. You don't have to be too sophisticated to win big. Then the terrible players quit because they realize it's not easy money. The mediocre players get better. The rake starts to become more difficult to overcome. Now, I think this takes a pretty long time to happen. I mean, I started playing poker seriously in 2003 or so. It was still really good as late as 2010, 2011, and I'm sure later too. And the key point, the reason I harp on game selection so much is because it doesn't happen everywhere, right? Like the game's getting tougher. It doesn't happen everywhere. If you went to a local casino and played live, low stakes or mid stakes cash or low mid stakes poker tournaments, it's still going to be really good action. Just like in best ball, where people have to physically be there to draft, I'm sure there are and will be good spots to find. But yes, basically what you're saying is that if everyone understands stacking, draft capital, buckets for positional allocation, ADP is mostly efficient, then what? Well, first, I'd argue we're a long way off from that. I still think people are going to make massive mistakes on that stuff for a long time. And then you also get people doing tons of FPS, fancy play syndrome stuff, like sophisticated people who don't realize that you can just play it straight and we just win. They're trying to be the smartest guy in the room and have FPS. That's going to happen for a while too. We saw that in poker, so much FPS. But yeah, I totally agree with you that eventually player takes will be the biggest edge. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I mean, what the fuck are we here for in the fantasy football streets if we're not going to have player takes? That's what I live for. And none of these sim bros or tech lords or spreadsheet socialists, don't let them talk down to you about player takes because that's the biggest edge that we can generate by far. That goes for DFS, best ball, anything. If you disagree with a ranking or projection that's influencing the market and you're right, that's how you get paid off massive. Now, that's, of course, easier said than done, but I'm always going for it. Like on Best Ball Explorer, there's a page that shows the draft board with how often you drafted X guy, like a heat map. So if I look at my heat map for DraftKings best ball drafts this year, I did 128 of them. You can very clearly see some of my player takes. I took 1% of Saquon Barkley at a 13 overall ADP, really bad. Took 16% Puka Nacua, really bad. 16% Neighbors, that's good. 23% Rashee Rice, good. Zero times I took Kelsey across 128 drafts, good. 14% Xavier Worthy, looks bad. 18% Kincaid, I don't know. 1% Mostert, 22% Singletary. I could keep going. But anyway, I know no one cares. My point is that I already think player takes is the best way to win. Not even in the future. Like right now, I think player takes is the best way to win. Of course, combined with the right fundamentals in best ball. So yeah, player takes, we continue to spend outrageous amounts on making our projections and rankings better through improved models, improved data science, improved back testing and fixes. It's a form of player takes. So long live player takes, our true king. Question 3 from Chris. He says, with so many people using podcasts to fall asleep, has it ever occurred to you that you act as an adult lullaby to many of your listeners? No, Chris, you see, people only fall asleep to boring podcasts. No one would ever possibly be able to fall asleep during the riveting shows that we put out. I mean, look, sometimes I'll think that I'm not doing anything for society. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a cop, I'm not a firefighter, I'm not a teacher, or anything that actually matters. But then I get messages from people who they're like, oh, how much we've helped them enjoy X part of their life, or they're going through tough times. They like listening to us, or something I said on a solo really allowed them to make a better decision, or just made people laugh or help them enjoy football more. Eh, You know. Anyway, Chris, I consider sleep one of the most underrated and sneaky important things in life. The data is just overwhelmingly clear. Our short-term and long-term health is massively impacted and improved by getting 8+ hours of sleep daily. It's not a brag to say, "Oh man, I'm so busy with work, or I'm partying so much, or I'm fucking and I'm not sleeping." Like that's not a brag. That's idiotic. So yes, I'm happy to serve as your lullaby, Chris. Why not? At least I'm doing some kind of service. All right, question 4. Last question we're going to do today comes from Steak Knife. He says, I don't ask this question to be a dick, but out of genuine curiosity. Why is it not okay for 2 or more guys to play a hand of online poker together, but it is okay for multiple fantasy experts to team up and draft a team together? Kind of seems like the same type of advantage. Yeah, so for those who don't know what Steak Knife is referring to here, basically in online poker, the rule is 1 player to a hand, period, and 1 player to an account. So maybe you're thinking, well, why does that matter? Well, in poker, knowing your opponent and what your opponent is going to do is everything. So if I've been playing against Mouth Breather 123 for the last year, I have tons of reads and data on him. It will be a huge edge for him or her to suddenly let someone else use their account and start playing differently. That's called ghosting or multi accounting. Now, in fantasy, is there really an advantage in screen name? Like we did an FFPC draft with me, Leone, and Silva. Would I have drafted differently if it was just my team only? Sure. Was there any disadvantage to the other people in the league, though? Not that I can really see. If anything, it's worse for all 3 of us to be drafting a team at the same time. All we do is fucking argue about who to take, and there's no clear vision for the team. I'm certainly open to debate on this topic, though. Like, for example, here's one thing I think is definitely wrong. You're in a home league with your boys. It's an online draft, like on Yahoo or ESPN or whatever, but you don't even show up. I just draft your team for you. That's kind of scummy to your boys, right? But when everyone is anonymous and online, anyways, it's an open league, anyways, that anyone can sign up for, like FFPC. I don't know. I think that's different. But yeah, hadn't really thought about that too much before. Certainly open to debate on that. All right. That is going to do it for this week's solo pod. We'll be back later today with Daigle for Waiver Wire, and then later tonight with Silva for team by team analysis of week 3. For in season subscribers, first round of week 4 projections will be out Wednesday night, and me, Silva, and Wiggins will be on the show Friday night talking every week 4 game. For Bruce and Luke, for Jerry, my one true love, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.